Do you want to make energetic future house tracks, but no matter what you do, the energy just isn't there? Maybe the bass isn't hitting hard enough, the synths just don't cut through, or the drums just don't have that punch. Well, I'm going to break down exactly how I made this track. Starting from a completely blank project and taking you through the process step by step. So by the end, you'll know how to make future house tracks that feel energetic and evoke emotion in your listener, which is the most important thing. Let's get into it. All right, so first thing we want to do is grab a kick, of course, because in most EDM, this is the foundation. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'll go to my signature sound pack and we'll just choose kick 12. I really like this one. Let's drag this in, make a classic 4 on the floor type of kick pattern here. And this is pretty loud, so let me put on a mixer track and we can make this around -8. This is a quick trick actually. If you put your kick around -8 and then everything else that you add later into your track is under that, then it'll sound pretty leveled. And you'll also have headroom. I know headroom is not really a thing anymore because of 32-bit audio, but anyway, it just works. We can go ahead and copy this and paste it over here, and I might make a little like 4-bar fill at the end, and then we can copy and paste this whole thing over. So now we have a 16-bar template. Oh yeah, I totally forgot, we need to set our BPM. So by default, in my default project, it's set to 128, but we can set this to anything. I think we might as well just set it to 130, just because why not? 128 is pretty typical house tempo. That's like the average, but 130 is slightly faster. So let's just try it. Then we can go ahead and grab a clap. So I'll choose this one. And I don't like all of these tambourines and hi-hats and stuff, so I'll go ahead and cut these out, and then we can just solo out the clap. There we go. And this is pretty loud once again, so let's reduce that. Sweet, I'll copy and paste this. And then we can position this a little bit better. And then we can select all of them and just fade this out because there's a little bit of reverb on the clap and we don't want it to just cut immediately. There we go. Let's get a layer in here. So I'll choose this clap. Has a nice mids texture to it. Once again, we can go ahead and just cut out one of these and position it correctly. And once again, fade this out and I'll just copy and paste this everywhere. Sweet, I'll throw both of these claps on their own mixer channel here. And what I want to do is see the combined loudness of both. So I'll select both of them here and we can go ahead and right click this and route to this track. So now we have a clap group. So both of these claps are hitting pretty loud. I'm actually gonna level this one down, it's pretty loud. And then we can turn down the whole thing a little bit. And I actually want this layer to come up just a little bit. I almost want it to be the main layer. Because this is more of the brightness. So let's turn this one down, let's turn this one up. I feel like we need one more clap layer. I know it seems a little bit excessive, but let's just try. This one's fine. All right, there we go. And I'll go ahead and add this to the same clap group that we made. I'm just giving all the claps a little bit of brightness here. And now we can go ahead and get some hi-hats in here for some rhythm. So I'll just grab one real quick. Looking for something bright. Might be better if we just grab a few layers and try some stuff out. So we'll do the classic offbeat hi-hat pattern. We can give it some velocity variation. And then we can pan it both left and right like this. This will just separate it from all the other drums and create a nice effect. And then we could go ahead, Control C, Control V, and then pan this second layer the opposite way. You want to think of panning as like a scale almost. So if something's panned to the right, you want something on the left that balances that out. Otherwise it can sound unbalanced, of course. So I'll delete this one. I don't really like it, but I do like all the rest of these. I'm going to replace this one with this one, the more classic house hi-hat. This one's actually a little bit too sharp as well, so let's find a replacement. That's perfect. So I'm hearing the hi-hats coming in on the second part of the drop. I'll just paste it here for now. We might add it to the first part of the drop later, but we'll see. Sweet. Final thing I want to add for the drums right now is a ride. So we can go ahead and grab this one, turn it down, and I'll just put this for every kick. Now, using a ride is actually a good way to map out the rhythm of your drop because you can have it hitting on certain spots and have it not hitting at certain spots. So for example, this first hit right here, I want it to be some heavy stab, and then the rest of the synths come in on this part of the drop after the first hit. And then right there. So you can see I'm kind of mapping this out, what I have in my head with the ride or other elements that we might have. So this is what our drums sound like so far. All right, next thing we want to go ahead and add is some type of bass line. We're gonna lay the foundations for the melody and the rest of the synths in the drop. So for me, what I'm hearing is a very heavy square type of bass. I don't know why, but that's just what I hear in my head. So we can go ahead and select a square, turn this down a few octaves. I'll give it a little punchy texture by using the envelope 2 and mapping this to the coarse pitch. And then we can make this spike shape. And then shift alt click, so this is unipolar modulation. So that way it's only going downward one way. Hopefully that makes sense. We can give this a little bit of distortion. All right, that's good for now. Personally, my favorite key is F sharp minor. So I think we should just make something in F sharp minor because that's what resonates. Right now, I'm just mapping out the flow of the drop, trying random things and seeing what sticks. What if we make this one stutter in quarter notes? This one can go up to an E. That's sounding decent, and then we can map out a different rhythm for the second half. So what if it was like bum 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 bum? Maybe we can extend these notes a little bit just so it's longer. Yeah, really, this is all you need to just map out the foundation and map out the flow of the drop. Then we can add the leads on top of this, the chords on top of this, and it will all sound very seamless. So let's do that. I'll go ahead and add this to the bass channel so that we can get the sidechain on it. And by the way, I just want to mention, if you want to work one-on-one with me, get all my sample packs, my presets, and project files, including the one in this video, you can check the link in the description. We can work together to basically take your music to the next level, so thought I'd mention it. Anyway. I'm hearing a rhythm switch in this part of the bass. So it could be as simple as just changing the octaves. And then maybe changing this to a C sharp. And then at the very end, I'll make this go from a C sharp to a D, which eventually leads into itself at the beginning of the progression, because at the start we have a D. Hope that makes sense. All right, we can start mapping out the leads here. So I'm gonna select this preset that I have from a while ago and make it more sustained. Let's see what we can do with this. And I think this lead needs a ton of processing, so might as well just get that out of the way. I'll apply some saturation, some compression, all of that stuff. Cut the lows on the EQ. And then maybe a ton of reverb. And what if we automate this mix knob right here to shoot up at certain points? The reverb sweep trick. could turn it on like halfway at certain points. Okay, that sounds decent so far. Really quickly, I want to show you a nice trick that I discovered for kicks. If you want your kick to fit into the track a little bit nicer, what you can do is apply a disperser to it on a very low amount. Just like a little bit, and target this around 200 hertz. Disperser smears frequencies over time. It's basically an all passes filter, I believe. Little before and after. Just barely noticeable, but it helps fit it into the track somehow. And then I'll go ahead and EQ this. So around 3000 hertz is that very harsh, snappy frequency. I don't really like that too much. Same for 300 hertz. It really depends on how we want to fit it into the track, so we might edit this later depending on what instruments we add, but I'll keep this for now. I also want to add some sidechain to the rides, just so the synths pop through a little bit more, as well as the kick. So I'll sidechain to the rides track, put a limiter on it with a pretty small ratio. Alright, let's start mapping out the second lead. So I'll use this preset. Yeah, that can work. Maybe just an octave down. And slightly shorter. I'm liking the sound so far. Need some layers, need some more production obviously, but I want to go ahead and variate this entire pattern. And on the very end of this lead, I want to add some type of variation. Yeah, maybe just putting this up to the E. That sounds fine. And we could probably do a little bit of slides. And then what if we try and make the main lead stutter with the bass? Like right here. I think it could work. I just need to design it a little bit better. Let's try that. Nice, just a very subtle stuttering effect. So I'm gonna go ahead and separate all of these channels here. Same with the variation. Let's go ahead and start layering this lead. For the FL users, a quick trick if your synth one shot is in a different key than C, of course, you can go to the wrench and then select which root note that the one shot is on. So in this case, it's D. You can right click it and then it will match it to that root note. So now the notes aren't off. Let's get another lead. So this one could work. This is a preset I made a while ago. Actually, I don't think it could work too well with the first part of the melody, but maybe the second part, this one. So I'll go ahead and copy that melody down here. Yeah, I think that works nicely. What if we find a lead in silent? If we add these chords, it will really fill up the mids, so we might as well. I just copied the bass line into the new silent one channel, and we can start making our chords. We can have it pop up at only the key points. Controlling the dynamics of your drop is such an art form. You want to be able to focus all your elements on certain points and then take them away, especially in this genre. It creates a dynamic movement. See how I only have these chords playing at the very key moments where I want everything to just like come up in the drop? Could go ahead and process these chords a little bit, give it some saturation just for the color. One thing I really want is for this first lead to have more texture and more brightness, and the second lead actually. So we can just keep layering it, making sure that every single layer has a purpose, of course. And we could probably add a more gritty bass layer to the bass. This is really getting into classic future bounce, future house territory, like Brooks style, but I'm here for it. I didn't have any script for this video, so I'm just kind of trusting the process. All right, new idea. I'm hearing the lead right here at this last part. I want it to slide down in pitch. Let's just try it real quick. I'll split up these leads here and make their own channels for each, just so we have them separated. And then place the last note on each of these. Then we can go ahead and modulate the pitch bend for every single one of these. So here's a quick trick for the FL users. We can map out the pitch bend or modulate it. So I'll create an automation clip. Let's say you want to control the pitch bend of multiple layers with just one automation. What you can do is, let's go to the next serum, for example. I'll make sure this is the exact same semitones up and down. So it was -12 and 12. Then we can tweak this, tools, last tweaked, and then link to controller. Then we can choose our pitch bend from there. Make sure remove conflicts is off and press accept. And both of these layers, these two serum layers, are now modulated by one automation clip. Super useful. So let's go ahead and make this pitch downward. All right, I'm gonna copy these chords, and I want the brightest, like most colorful chord that you've ever seen. Let's go ahead and make that. I'm not sure how it's gonna sound, but we'll see. We'll figure it out on the way. So I want it to almost open up, and to do that we can use a filter. Give it a little bit of noise. And then let's give it a spectral oscillator. So maybe we could just choose some random synth or a vocal. Put this into the spectral. And then warp it. And then map it back into pitch with some pitch map or some chroma. You've seen me use this technique before. I'm just trying to find the right layer here. Maybe a combination of pitch map and chroma. That's almost achieving the texture I want. It's almost there. I think it might just be a matter of changing each note. Sweet, that's solid so far. My ears are pretty fatigued right now. I was listening to it pretty loudly, so I'm gonna take a break for a little bit, rest my ears, and we'll come back to this. We'll mix it, add more layers, add the intro, and do all of that stuff. So see you on the other side. All right, we're back, and I'm not gonna lie, I did add a few extra elements to this track or to this drop just because I was hearing some stuff in my head. I wanted to quickly get that out into the project before I lost it in my head and I didn't remember what it was, right? So I'll show you what it is. First of all, let's listen to what we have so far. So I'm trying to remember what I added on video last time, but I'll just try and explain here. So first of all, we have these stab layers, just to add that extra impact to the beginning of the drop. We have a few extra lead layers. So this layer plays in the beginning of the drop as well as in the second phrase over here. just to have a little bit of consistency. I think this is one of the tips that I showed in my previous video. Anyway, I added this little white noise snare layer. This adds a ton of texture and brightness for those first stabs. And that's really all I added here. I wanted to keep it simple, but just add a few extra details to the drop. So I think we'll come back to this later. Let's just work on finishing the track and getting out of this loop. So I'll just select all this. We can drag it a few bars over here, create some structure, maybe over here. And of course, you've seen me do this before if you've watched some of my videos. What we're gonna do is just take the chord progression from the drop or the bass notes and make some pattern out of that. And this will just be to lay the foundations for the intro. So I'll take the bass notes right here. We can go ahead and make a new pattern. I'll call this intro bass. We can paste that in here and then just extend all of these notes to actually match the bars. Hopefully that makes sense. So there we go. I'll quantize it and then we can chop these notes here. There we go. Maybe bring it down an octave. Maybe these two could go up an octave. Just that simple octave switch can give it a different feeling. Now we can just lay this in the intro. Boom, we have the foundation. This is a little bit of a weird analogy, and I tell this to all my students. By the way, if you want to work with me, you can check the first link in the description. I think you'll like it. But anyway, once we lay that foundation, whether this is a respace like we have right here, or some type of pad, or something very simple for the intro, I like to think of the intro as just the night sky. You have this big black canvas, right? And then you have these little stars. You have some comets, some planets, etc. And this can be all the other elements that you sprinkle onto this canvas, right? That's at least how I like to think about it. Hopefully that makes sense. Alright, so I have a reference track up here. It's Biochemical by Martin Garrix and Seth Hills. Just thought I'd use this as a reference. We can get inspiration from this for the intro. So in that track, I won't play it because I'll probably get a copyright strike, but it has this saw lead with a ton of reverb on it, similar to the one we have in the drop. So I'll try and make that ambient lead here. You can give this some warp mode. And then what if we made the pitch bend slightly go downwards, just because this will give it an eerie effect. So I'll take the pitch bend, we can automate this, and let's see. Yeah, that's a cool effect. Maybe on the second bar here, or the second half, we can change the note. And then this can go down to a G sharp, which is actually the perfect fifth of the C sharp. It's giving this a little bit of portamento here. And then what if we add some sort of background melody? This could be a pluck, something to add contrast to what we have, because we have two very smooth elements, the respace and then that lead. Let's try and add something more plucky. Once again, we can refer back to the reference as well. I'm trying to decide if I should just keep it one note or kind of variate it like this. Also, this F is off key. Let me put it back to F sharp. Yeah, that sounds cool. We can keep this for now. Once again, you kind of want to be fast with this. You don't want to force your creativity or anything because that can sometimes end up bad, but you want to just try and get stuff down. Many producers have the fear of like, what if my intro doesn't fit with the chorus or the drop? You just have to do things and see if it works and give yourself permission to be wrong. And I noticed I just applied this to the wrong channel. There we go. I think I'm just going to keep it simple and not add these variations. Yeah, that's perfect. And we can go ahead and tuck this into the background with the bandpass EQ. I like this little pause right here. It sounds a little bit off-putting, but I think it's creative at the same time, so we'll keep it. Then maybe we can just get some random ambient vocal. I think I've used this sample before, but whatever. Alright, so this is kind of the intro section right here, and then it transitions into the verse. So we can go ahead and grab a tambourine transition or just something to smooth these parts together. Maybe this one right here. Maybe we'll cut the instruments here. Yeah, I think that sounds cool. Maybe to give this bass some variation so it's not super repetitive, we can turn these down an octave. And I'll go ahead and separate this ambient lead into its own pattern. Now here's a really cool tip that I always do. So we're going to take any random drum loops. We might as well do it down here so we have some space. So drum loop. This one's cool. We'll take this. I'll time stretch it. Maybe this one. Then we can load up a drum rack or really just place a bunch of random percussion samples. So I'll grab a bunch of random ones here. This one, this one, this one, why not? Then we can just place them in a random drum pattern. Kind of randomize these velocities, and I'll just place a bunch of random notes. Then we can maybe make a duplicate and variate this one. Cool, once we have this, we can place it here. And it sounds pretty weird. It doesn't really fit the track yet. So that's why we're going to warp it with a ton of effects. So we could, once again, do a bandpass EQ. Apply some delay to this. Maybe some frequency shifter. We could even halftime it. And maybe double time this. So you can get very interesting results from this. That sounds really cool actually. Maybe I'll duplicate this a few times. See, like, I've never heard a drum loop like this before. It sounds unique. There we go. We can use this. So I'm thinking this texture drum loop combined with maybe a kick. So we can try and find a pretty soft kick. Maybe this one. We'll go ahead and EQ out the highs just so it's a very low thump. Now in the build-up, we can have this texture drum loop slowly open up because we did apply a filter to it, remember? It's this one, wait, it's this one right here. So we might as well have this slowly open up in the build-up. I think that could be cool. And then make an alternate pattern where that snare keeps hitting. Something like this. We're almost creating the build-up already. Sweet, so now we have a rough idea for the intro, the build-up, and the drop is pretty much finished. So we're getting closer. So I'm thinking, what if we go ahead and add a vocal just to get some more inspiration in here? I think it'll fill up the track in the intro as well. Let's just drag in this one. This is a random one I found from Splice. This is in A minor, so we can pitch it down to F sharp minor because F sharp minor is 3 notes down. All of this time I'll be fighting. This time I'll be fighting. Yeah, all of this time I'll be waiting, waiting for you, waiting for you, yeah, yeah. All of this time I'll be fighting. Yeah, all of this time I've been waiting, waiting for you, yeah, yeah. Okay, it sounds decent. We can keep it in there for now. Now the next thing I want to do to add more contrast to these smooth elements in the intro is some plucky type of synth, maybe some chords. So I'll try and make something here. Maybe we get a filter. Just do a classic saw pluck for now with some compression. Let's try that. Sounds decent. I want to make this somehow unique. Maybe it's just a matter of warp mode. Okay, this is a good foundation layer. It's very 2015 sounding though, which I kind of like, but I also want it to have more of a unique sound to it. Okay, that sounds good, but I'm actually gonna have to render this out because it's getting super laggy. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Consolidate. Cool, there we go. We got this layer now. Might as well just delete it from here. And we can mix these two together. We can also put some reverb on both of these. Now I want to give some type of preview of the actual drop because otherwise it's going to sound like two completely different songs, right? So we can maybe take the first drop lead here and make some type of variation for the intro. So I'll paste this pattern here. Maybe we can use this sound. Very small preview of the drop. Kind of hooks the listener in as well. So as the intro evolves, we have this verse section right here, which transitions into this build up. Right at this part, I'm thinking, what if we take these leads, the second drop leads, and cut everything out in this section and put a little preview of these drop leads right here. Just hear me out. It's got to be worked on a little bit, but I think it'll work. So at this point right here, we can probably put a filter on those leads. And then fade these in really quickly. Sweet, just to help it transition a little bit better. Impacts, sweeps, etc. We can add those there. That's a cool effect. Add a little sub drop and let's grab an impact. This might be good for some ear candy. I just don't want it to be like too corny, like a movie trailer. Maybe this one. This one's a little bit more chill. Yeah, that works. think we also need an impact that transitions into the actual build itself. So I'll add that. Maybe this one. All right, so after listening through the whole thing a little bit, there's a few things that I want to do. I've taken some mental notes. First of all, the intro doesn't feel like it evolves enough. There's not enough contrast between sections to create that evolving feeling. Another thing, we need to add the basic drum fills to the build and some other effects and ear candy. And then we can make the transition between the build and the drop a little bit more smooth by giving the listener a preview of the leads in the drop. So we're just trying to blend everything together, make it feel more smooth, and then add extra details to it to make it more unique. Maybe we take the bass out of this intro to have more contrast and then put the lead here. We could also probably fade in these chord layers. We can give a little preview of the vocals as well, like just do some little chops and whatnot. Now there's this one formant shifting plugin called Pitch Monk. Gonna look really dumb, but this is what it looks like. Completely free plugin. It allows you to pitch the formants of the vocal or whatever sound it is and make it sound deeper without changing the pitch. I'm gonna start adding a little bit more transitions and random effects here just to give it more detail. We can put a little clap reverb thing here just for the effect. This vocal could also use a little bit of reverb and maybe some delay. One cool trick I like to do, if I just want to add some harmonies to a vocal, I'll make this unique, just make a copy of it. We can put it on a new mixer track. Then we'll apply heavy auto-tune to it. We can put the scale on F sharp minor, of course, turn up the retune speed all the way up, and then pitch this up by a few semitones. You just have to be careful because sometimes it can sound off. So now this vocal has its own harmonies. Go ahead and get some build-up fills in here as well as a snare. I'll just go ahead and layer some fills in here. Once again, let's fade this build fill in with the filter. You can see how much filtering I do, specifically low pass filters. It just makes everything so much more smooth. There's this one sample in this texture drum loop that's bothering me. I'm gonna try and find it. Okay, it's this one, percussion 2. So I'll go ahead, press Alt X, and just level this down. But not all the way. What if we put the classic clock ticking sample right here? So I'm just gonna follow that style. It's fine. This whole track feels very 2018, I feel like, so I'm just gonna follow that style. I haven't made this style in a long time, and I wanna keep expanding outside of this drop, so might as well just start building outside. I'm thinking right after the second verse here in the breakdown, we take all the synths, make this very big synth sounding thing without the drums. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. So I'll take all the leads. As well as the basses. And maybe make some more sustained pattern. So we'll have this second verse lead up to this synth part. This is inspired by Like I Do by David Guetta, Brooks, and Martin Garrix. Maybe before this big synth part, we add some very emotional strings or something. So we can try this plugin. I got it for free a long time ago. Make some emotional chords. I'm not sure if this is gonna work, but we'll make it work and we can randomize the velocity. I'll use the sustained bass pattern to make alternative sustained versions of these chords. I want to make an alternative to this lead, maybe with some bit crushing. Then maybe make a melody alternative over here. That sounds pretty cool. Now we somehow have to find a way to transition the second verse into this part, then back into the build up into the last drop. So maybe a sub drop here, and then cut it right when it starts playing. Might as well add some vocals in this part as well. Ooh, and then I hear this very soft, like arpeggio sound. Let me try and make it. I don't know why I'm hearing those notes in my head. I almost want this to just pass by. I think it just needs a different wavetable. And then maybe to just warp it even more, some crystallizer or a portal or something like that. We can get that drum texture and cake pattern back in here. Awesome. I really love how it's coming together. There's a few parts we need to smooth out, and then of course we need to add the second buildup and the second drop as well. I'm gonna go take a break because I don't want to get ear fatigue, so I'll go do that. Then I'll come back to this track and we can finish it up. All right, we're back. And so I did the final details of the track. I kind of just smoothed out some of the transitions, added some layers, and just the final details for like the last 30 minutes. So I'll explain what I did. First thing I did was add these atmospheres here. Always gotta have atmospheres. This one too. Just for the background effect. Just kind of sets the scene a little bit more, add some detail. I also ended up taking the leads from the drop, putting them in the buildup, and then slowly filtering them in just to kind of give a preview of it. So this is what it sounds like. Just barely in the background, you can kind of hear it. At the very end of this drop, the transition from the drop section to the second verse, I took this clock effect, faded it out with a reverb, and then put a tape stop effect on it. It looks like this. So of course, this is the tape stop effect. I turned the stop time all the way up so that it takes a while for it to actually slow down, and then just automated it to turn on right here. So this is what it sounds like by itself. Also automated the pitch for a little bit of extra detail. And then I filled up this part, this big synth part where everything cuts out and just the synths from the drop play without the actual drums. So I filled this up with some chords and stuff like that. This is what it sounds like. So I'll just kind of quickly run through the layers here. Of course, we got these stab samples from the drop itself. We have the leads. I made a duplicate of this pluck sound and then added some extra harmonies on top of it, just for the extra detail. Then this one, chord layer, and then the color layer. There's a crowd screaming sample. This layers with it nicely. Then we have the second part, just the classic leads. There's the bass. Okay, and this is an idea I got from Tonight by Nate Sib. So near the end of the track, before it fades back in, there's this like huge impact sample with a ton of distortion. And so I took that inspiration and applied it here. I think it sounds cool. Especially because everything's so dry and it just kind of cuts out super fast. Oh yeah, another little detail is this bass. I won't have the actual sub bass layer playing all the time. So for example, it's playing in these two notes right here, and then the sub cuts out of this note individually, just to give it some extra dynamics, which sounds really cool. And then we have this. I changed the bass note here. You can't overthink this stuff. You just have to like snap your fingers and do something, see how it sounds. And I thought this sounded cool. Of course, then we go back into the build up and it goes back into the drop. So anyway, that's pretty much all I did. It was just, like I said, those final details, as well as maybe adding some risers and some sweeps and stuff like this one. Oh yeah, and I also added this one. Anyway, I think it's time we listen to the final result. Let's do it. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Hope this inspired you. It inspired me going back to this style since I haven't made it in such a long time. So anyway, if you want to work one-on-one with me to take your music to the next level, please feel free to check that first link in the description, book a call and we can talk about it. Also, this project file you just saw me produce, I'm giving it all away to my clients. So if you end up joining, that's a bonus for you. Anyway, hope you have a great rest of your day and I'll see you in the next one.